I know kids. I mean, they just want to be happy.
Those kids had rights.
They were losers.
Troublemakers.
Can we just skip the preliminaries and find out what you're doing about all this?
They're just kids.
Never thought I'd see you again. I thought that trip was done. But every time I turn around, you're pointed with a loaded gun. Leaned over backwards to please you, man. All you did was push me down. Jesus had a plan for me all along. He never tries to spin me out. I guess there's a fate worse than death. I know you put me through it, but that life's all behind me now. You used me and I never knew it. I said no, I never know it. Lots of us kids seen too many hurts. Lots of us no love days. Lots of us kids seen too many things. Lots of us kids we wanna change. Guess there's a fate worse than death. I know you put me through it. That life's all behind me now. You used me and I never knew it. I said no, I never know it. Lots of us kids see too many hurts. Lots of us no love days. Lots of us kids see too many things. Lots of us kids we wanna change.
Greetings, fellow Earth babies, and welcome to Post-Punk Heartstrings. I'm JimmyJames S. Butler, of course, you know that by now. And you were listening to a little clip of Us Kids by the Lifesavers. And we have a very special episode that I'm very excited about. I threw you out a hint at the end of our previous episode that we would be talking with John Smeby and Todd Zeller, the two main driving forces behind the upcoming documentary called Us Kids, an Alternative Music Rebellion. And there are so many of us from a certain Christian alternative culture from the 80s and 90s that are so excited about this project. And I think we're looking to sometime after the first of the year in 2026, we might begin to see some signs of showings. I'm not sure what the timeline is. I know it's ever-changing, and they're putting a lot of work into it. But we're definitely looking forward to that. And I'm so happy that we got to sit down with John and Todd. And we also got to hear from Chad Ashton, who is the film archivist, among, I think, many other things. And I think it was really important to John and Todd to make sure that we were able to hear from him on this episode to get his input. And they wanted to definitely highlight all of the work that he has done and he has brought to the process of bringing this documentary to light. There's so much work that goes on behind the scenes in doing this type of project. And so I'm really glad that we're able to share some of those things, and they were able to throw out many, many thanks on this episode and kind of do the usual of how they got into music and how they got interested and their path that brought them here. I said a little bit during the episode and maybe at the end of the previous episode of Post-Punk Heartstrings about those of us who feel like we're in like this little club of alternative Christian music that was happening in the 80s. And really a lot of these bands were kind of, they just wanted to be making music and making albums, and they just kind of, their path, because they were Christians or had a message that was from a spiritual perspective, they kind of ended up going through these Christian labels, and for better or worse, that's the path that their careers took them on. And I'm sure there'll be a lot more exposition related to that in the documentary. So if there are any of you listeners that have no idea what I'm even talking about, keep listening. Please explore all the bands that we will hear about on this episode and the clips that I'm going to share. There are some bands that we have covered before, like the Lifesavers Underground, headed by Michael Knott. There will be a number of other episodes that relate to these bands who really deserve to be heard. And so I won't say too much more other than I really enjoyed talking to John, Todd, and Chad. It was a really touching, heartfelt conversation, and hopefully this will further whet your appetite for the documentary that is to come. And with that, here we go. We want to know about you guys and your history as far as like how you got interested in music, whether you play music or whether you're just huge fans, and how that obviously it became a central part of your lives. And so I want to hear about that from each of you. And, that's what I really enjoy hearing about. That inspires me. So John, you want to go first?
I was never in a band, but I did have piano lessons when I was growing up. I think I started around maybe 7 or 8. That was my instrument, keyboards. We had a stand-up piano, and I really enjoyed at first learning how to play. I was being taught, classical and Chopin and Mozart, but then at some point I started listening to like Simon and Garfunkel and Elton John and the Carpenters, and I wanted to play those songs, and my teachers didn't really like that. They sort of shut that down really fast. My mom, at one point was, well, do you want a different teacher? So I had like 3 or 4. I was hoping that maybe someone would get on my side, but it really didn't happen. And at some point, I just decided to leave piano lessons and start playing tennis. It was a binary choice. I decided I couldn't do both. I wanted to do something relatively well. And I think my mom was really bummed out about it, but I can still sit down on the piano and just mess around. Todd's heard me a couple times. Every once in a while, we'll do an interview somewhere, and there'll be a piano, and he knows that I'm going to go for that piano.
Oh, yeah. He can play. Yeah. He can play.
Well, I can play chords. That's about it.
That's important.
That's cool.
It's important.
Yeah.
Do you want me to step in?
What about you? Yeah, you can jump in, Todd.
So I'm going to share a funny story with you guys. I don't think I've shared it with anybody but a couple of close friends. So I am not an accomplished musician whatsoever. Huge music fan, of course, for many moons. But when I was about 21 years old, maybe, I had always wanted to play with friends of mine in a band, because my 3 closest friends, literally since 7th grade in high school, we're still friends today. They're still playing music together today. They live up in Portland, Oregon. And so I got it in my head that, I was listening to a lot of keyboard music. I was listening to like a lot of Ray Lynch. I don't know if you guys remember him, but Ray Lynch, George Winston, piano and whatnot. And a lot of Depeche Mode at the time. And so I started I bought a piano from my little apartment, and an old used piano, and messed around with that. Had a lot of good times, but I decided to take some piano lessons for about a year. Took guitar lessons at the same time from the same teacher, actually. And I really enjoyed it, and I mostly was just like, can I do this? Can I play something? And really had a good time with it. And then because I'd like written poetry in high school and such, and won a few little awards and things, I thought, well, I want to write some lyrics. I want to try to write something. And so bought a 4-track recorder. I bought a Roland Juno 106 keyboard. And I had the stuff. I had all the right gear, and my buddies would come over, and they're like, we're going to come over and we'll jam. And pretty soon they were kind of inviting me to, I was just doing simple chords and very, very simple stuff. They were the accomplished musicians, and I really admired all of them, still do. And so they said, I was dating this girl named, I won't say names. I was dating this girl.
That's wise.
I was dating this girl at the time, and, she was very attractive, and she was really into like, Madonna and Depeche Mode and just a lot of whatever music of the day. And so my guy friends are like, we need to get her singing, we need a front woman, it'll be great. And we'll start a band. And I'm like, okay, we don't know if she can sing yet though, And, So we write a song, and they used my lyrics, which was cool, but they, wrote the gist of it, and I just did a few chords. And we had 2 keyboard setups, another friend, guitar, and so on. And so we finally brought her over, and it was wonderful to hear her singing my lyrics. I was really excited about that, and it was a decent little tune. And so we recorded it. I think I even shot video of it. I doubt if it's still around, but so the rehearsal closes, and we go through the song like 3 times, and she leaves and she goes to work or whatever, and the guys all just look at me with all like the same stone cold, mad, pissed off face. She can't sing to save her life, me, And I'm like, oh, I know. And I go, guys, I can't tell her. You tell her. So anyway,
oh, no.
We never got past, I think, 1 practice. We somehow weaseled out of, starting a band for whatever reason. They probably said, "Oh, we're going to start another band or something." Who knows?
What'd you tell her?
I don't recall, but
The band, they decided to not.
It was something like that. I mean, this was eons ago, but it was fun while it lasted in a very small way. But I will say today, just fast forward now, literally currently as we speak. So these same friends, they now have a band, the 3 of them, a 3-piece called the Sea Hymnal. They have home recording studio that's totally dialed in. They're all very, very, very well accomplished, great musicians. They all play in different bands all over Portland and whatnot. And so they started a project about 6 years ago now. And we all get together as friends about every year and a half. We rent a cabin up their way, and they bring all their gear down. I bring my video cameras, and we, I shoot it, we document it, we have some fun with it. And so now they're up to 10 songs, and by golly, they did old Todd a favor, and they said, Z, we want you to sing on some choruses, and we want you to contribute some lyrics, just like old times.
Oh, cool.
So that was kind of special, and it means a lot to me that they still include me. So I'll gladly share.
So you're part of the band.
Sometime. Well, I'm like this outlier, just like I was before, but it's all good. I'm proud of those guys. They write some great music.
They have a song called "In Our Valley."
They do. There you go. That's them.
Look at Jim. Jim's on it.
Yeah, you're on it. I love that.
I found it.
That is them. And I think they have. Are there 2 singles now? I think there's just.
I just see one.
Okay, yeah. Maybe the other one's not on Spotify yet. I don't remember where it's at. So that song, "In Our Valley," is literally about the Central Valley, California, which is Northern California, Redding, where we all grew up, together. The whole theme of the album is kind of an ode to like our dads and, the landscape of what we grew up with in Northern California. So
awesome.
Cool.
But
one other side note, and Us Kids film connection to our friends in the Sea Hymnal. So I told them about Chris Colbert because they didn't really mix today currently with some of the artists that I still follow, but they used to go to a lot of the shows. They'd go to 77 shows with me down at the Warehouse. So, we all go way back in that scene, The Call and a lot of the other bands in the Bay Area, the choir, a lot of choir shows. But so I said, you should have Colbert take a listen to your music and see if maybe he could mix and master it. And I think Chris is on at least 2 songs in right now as we speak. So it's kind of nice to have him on board.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's cool.
The tennis ball is going back over to John now.
Nice.
Because you switched to tennis. So then at some point you became more part of a music type focus, right?
So I switched back. This transition, I didn't see this coming, but that's actually brilliant on your part. You've done your research, because what happened was when I ended up going to college at the University of Redlands, this is Southern California, small little private liberal arts college. I didn't realize at the time that there was a radio station on that campus, but I started off on the tennis team freshman, sophomore year. And I was never a great player, but I was decent enough to make the team. Well, my roommate and I, beginning of the junior year, we were in our dorm room listening to music, and we looked at each other, hey, there's a radio station on this campus, isn't there? And we found it. It was 89.1 FM, and tuned in, and they were playing this really weird music. Well, that's college radio in the late 70s. Really weird music, right? A song that no other radio station would be playing. And so we're like, we could do better than that. We should be able to go down and play like Led Zeppelin and Leonard Skinner and The Who. So the next morning, I went into that station and I said, hey, how do we get a program? And Carly, I think was her name, she was sitting there reading Rolling Stone. This would have been 1979, 10 years past Woodstock, but the station smelled of smoke. Any type of smoke you want to throw out there, it had it inside that station. And she said, well, that doesn't happen overnight. You have to take classes and you have to start doing newscasts and blah, blah, blah. Well, that's what we ended up doing. And so that's sort of like how I got involved with music again, was doing a rock and roll program, eventually just normal secular rock. And at that point, I had just become a Christian in college. I was sort of a late bloomer. And a friend of mine on the tennis team, he had just basically gotten baptized the summer before our freshman year. And he said, hey, you should think about doing a Christian rock program. And I said, well, maybe you're right, but no, I'm having too much fun doing this. And so he slipped me the Phil Keaggy song "Time," the live version, one day, and said, I dare you to play it on your program, like in between, Pink Floyd and Alan Parsons. And I did, and we got calls like, who was that? That's where'd you find that? And so that's sort of my beginning to this entire thing that we're talking about.
I don't want to jump too far ahead. So before we go any further, we always ask everybody like what their first album that they bought or were given, what you really wanted and, what made it special, and do you still like it today? We can jump over to Todd.
If I go back to my first purchased album, I probably did not buy it myself. It was probably a Christmas gift or something from my parents. And as far as vinyl goes, I did not own my record player yet. I think this was 4th grade or 5th grade. And God bless my parents. If they hear this, I love them dearly. But why they let me join the KISS Army in 4th or 5th grade, as a kid who did not know anything about
a 9-year-old going to class with little makeup.
Right. I mean, I am watching Andy Griffith and Leave It to Beaver on television, but I'm really into KISS for some reason, and I can't even remember where that obsession. Thank the good Lord, it only lasted a while. But I literally have photos of myself and my younger brother Steve. I'm wearing KISS pajamas. He's wearing Star Wars pajamas. He's holding up a cool, replica toy of the Millennium Falcon. And I'm holding up Kiss Alive 2 was my first record. Nice. Double album, if I remember right. Wow. And then, yeah. And I think in the background, there's already like posters on the wall of Kiss or something. But,
Did you have the Kiss record player?
I did not. I listened to my parents were kind enough to give me time on their, their big console style turntable for a while till I got my own eventually.
I didn't know. I've never seen this Kiss record player.
Oh, there's one out there.
Okay. No, yeah. I mean,
go to
being
eBay
the fact that I was in the Kiss Army, I should know this, but I don't recall the record player. I did collect the trading cards at one point. I remember that much. There was Kiss trading cards.
Oh, yeah. Yep. I do remember those.
See?
All right, John. Can you top that?
Oh, there's no way you can top Kiss. But I'm going to be really transparent, and I don't normally share this publicly, but So the first rock concert, I know you're going to ask about the first album that I bought, and I will share that in a second. But the first rock concert I went to was Roxy Music. So that was
nice.
That was pretty.
That's a great first concert.
You like that?
That's a good
that
one.
was it was at the Hollywood Palladium. It was my junior year in high school, and I was shocked my mom let me go. It was a school night, but so that happened, and I was a big fan of Roxy Music in 11th grade. But the first pop concert I went to was the Carpenters. And I mentioned them earlier when I'm talking about like things I wanted to play, when I was younger on the piano. But this is where I'm going to get really super transparent. I was listening before I found this album, Thick as a Brick by Jethro Tull. I was listening to the Partridge Family. I had albums. I had vinyl of the Partridge Family. Okay, believe it or not, I had the Carpenters. I don't normally bring this out, but I'm going to for this podcast because I really like you guys, and I think you deserve to know the truth.
It's a safe place.
Well, I hope so. Now, so that's going to lead into tennis. We're going back to tennis, and I was in middle school. I think I was like maybe 11 or 12, and I was going to this summer tennis camp for a week up in Big Bear Lake. And the counselor... So we were in this, like 6 or 7 guys with this counselor, and Thick as a Brick had just been released. I'd never heard of Jethro Tull. I'd never heard of Thick as a Brick. And he had a copy of it. I forget if it was a cassette tape. It must have been, unless he brought up a vinyl player. I don't remember. But I remember all week listening to whatever that was, and it grew on me. And by the time tennis camp was over and I went home, I was like, I need to find where I can get this, because that album, and even to this day, every once in a while, I will go back to that. And so that was the first vinyl that I actually, other than Partridge Family.
They're both great.
Just a great drummer.
By the way, I forgot to say at the beginning of that there's no judgment. I forgot to say that.
Thank you very much.
We've been judged
but in your case, in you guys' case, there's no need.
Okay. All right.
I like the Carpenters. I still listen to that sometimes.
Oh, I still do. They put me to sleep at night. Not because it's boring, but no, it's very soothing.
Oh, yeah.
I listen. So I talked about Roxy Music concert. My mom took me to see the Carpenters. Okay, and when I was like 12 at the Greek Theater, and I was like, oh my gosh, Karen Carpenter. I was in love with Karen. I was. Yeah.
They were on my parents' turntable all the time, and so I knew probably every song with a lot of other artists that I probably wasn't into myself, but because my parents spun them all the time, I was, I probably knew a lot of those records inside and out,
Yep.
Now, were your parents Christians, Todd? Were you a Christian family?
So my parents were. My dad was not a practicing Christian, but my mom was, and she's the one who dragged us into church and got us there on time every, Sunday school and, Wednesday nights. We did it all. Eventually, my dad did join up, and he was a very big part of, and still is today, of, like my faith story. And, both parents still solid Christians, rock solid, and I'm, grateful they're still around.
Cool. Yeah. The reason I asked is because I feel like the Carpenters, they somehow, they were accepted into the Christian, families. Like my family, I grew up Baptist, and my brothers and sisters listened to a lot of stuff. But I remember in the Christian circles I was in, like a lot of them listened to the Carpenters. That was acceptable.
They were very safe. They were very safe.
They were safe. But see, my parents were like, my dad was the country guy, so he had like Waylon and Willie and Johnny Cash, and he was into a little bit of the dirtier, country rock kind of stuff of the day. And my mom was more like a little bit, maybe the more flowery, poetic stuff, like, big on Simon and Garfunkel, Concert in Central Park, the big live album? Yeah, I think, yeah. Well, anyways, I love that music, and I still love a lot of that music today, that I was raised on, but it was like Blood, Sweat, and Tears, and the Mamas and the Papas, a lot of 60s, 70s music. Yeah. And then, of course, when disco hit, we had Saturday Night Fever on there. We had K-Tel's greatest disco hits of the 70s or whatever it was. I don't know, all kinds of things. But thankfully, I appreciate it. I mean, I appreciate music today, I think, because my parents played a lot of it. If it wasn't the radio going, it was 8-track tapes. It was a lot of vinyl. And then eventually, of course, I started gathering my own collection. And thankfully, I got got better, more sense eventually, and definitely delved into a lot more interesting music than Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons, But look at them today; they're billionaires because they've still got duration, I guess.
Yeah, indeed. So, I think John, you kind of touched on this. You can say more. Todd, you can touch on this and make some comments as well. So how did each of you first get involved in the Christian alternative music scene? John, I think you kind of mentioned a little bit, when you played the Kagi song, and I don't know if that was your first interaction with Christian music.
So that was the first time I played anything considered Christian rock during that secular program I was doing while still in college. When I graduated, I actually went back to the university to work in the development office, and I went back to the station and I said, hey, because it wasn't just for students. That radio station was for community members as well. If they had a special type of music, whether it was reggae or polka, literally there was a polka show or punk, and you wanted to bring your own albums in and play those. So I said, what if I asked if I could do a Christian rock program, like 1 hour a week? Would that be okay? And the station manager at the time, Bill Bruns, looked at me and he said, what would it be called? And I hadn't come up with a name yet. And so the first thing that came to my mind was reality. And I asked it like a question, reality. And I looked at him and he goes, oh, let me see what I can do and I'll get back to you. And he said, well, the next day or the next week, he said, what about Mondays from 6 to 7? Monday evenings from 6 to 7. I said, great. So at that point, I got really nervous because I really, other than I had a Randy Stonehill album at the time, I had a Larry Norman, I didn't have a whole lot. But this is the same guy that gave me that Phil Kagi album. And he challenged me, you should find out if you can do a program of all Christian rock. And so he helped me out. There were some that the radio station had, and I started buying more. And eventually, the record companies find out who's doing the programs, and they start sending us, product, whether it was a cassette or vinyl. And so that would have been 1982 when the program was called Reality Rock. We eventually added the word rock to reality, and that was the beginning of that, was that 1 hour a week on Monday evenings.
That's cool.
That's
Very
awesome.
cool. Yeah, for me, I think it was probably, so back to my parents, somewhere the needle skipped or shifted with my parents. And I think we all started becoming aware of, probably my mom started listening to some Christian radio or something. They probably were saying, oh, Amy Grant or whatever, that kind of thing. 'Cause there wasn't a lot of Christian pop radio in those days. This would have been late 70s, early 80s, I think. And I'm mostly a child of the 80s, graduated high school in 85. So for myself, I think they were taking us as kids to, I remember specifically a church show. Maybe it was at my own church where they came to us, or we went somewhere nearby in town. And it was a second chapter of Acts, show. But I feel like they maybe even sang to tracks or something. It wasn't, it's a church show. It was very basic. I don't recall a band on stage with them, but maybe. And that was way too middle of the road for my taste. I was into a lot of other music by then. So then at some point we got wind of, this is in Redding, California, Northern California. I was born in Southern California, but raised in Northern California for most of my days. And I remember hearing wind of a show that I don't think even, I was probably in youth group by then, I guess, but I don't recall the age. I was still pretty young, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, thereabouts. I was exposed to a band called Petra and a band called Servant. And I want to say we might have seen Servant first, or maybe it was a double bill. I can't recall. But I remember specifically with the Servant show, they were giving out a free record at the door. It was like World of Sand or one of those eras. I've talked about this with my brother, and he's way better on facts than I am, or, timelines. But that being said, I really liked the band Servant. I was like, oh, wow, these guys put on a wonderful stage show. And, of course, I'd hear my friends, basically saying, Christians suck and Christian music gotta suck. All those artists, they suck. They're not talented. And I was always very like, no, give my people a chance, and
Let my people go.
Let my people go.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So
We'll shout out to Pharaoh.
I did have a staff too at the time. No. So I just remember being really wowed at this as a kid at this servant show. Because of course it was an inspiring message and that was wonderful. But of course I'm a kid who loves rock and roll. And I'm like, they've got pyrotechnics at this show. They know how to play their instruments. This is delivered well. It was entertaining. It was challenging. It was all these good things. And so I'm kind of like walk away with this idea of, and somewhere around the same time I saw Petra as well for the first time. And this would have been, what's the original singer's name? Greg
Foles.
Greg Foles? Yeah, Greg Foles.
He was original.
Yeah, original. Yeah. That's
Bob Hartman also sang.
Yeah, Bob. Yeah. I mean, Bob, I just remember Bob being a great guitar player and whatnot. At the time, anyways, and being impressed. So somewhere in that same time, those are the two standout shows as a kid that made me shift my thinking of like, oh, there's something other than the radio. There's something other than all this music that, I'm listening to Van Halen records or whatever I've got on my turntable. And my parents are just like, can you turn that racket down? It's not saying anything good to your brain, Todd. It's, melting your morals. And so I think they were all for this idea of at least one of their three sons, if not all three of us by now, we're all sort of starting to shift at the same time, being exposed to more and more Christian music. Not so much the alternative yet. This would have been, all of a sudden, Daniel Amos is in the house because of my older brother, Jeff. He's 5 years older than me. Had great taste in music most days, and he's playing, Horrendous Disc and Shotgun Angel, that era. Larry Norman, of course, Randy Stonehill. And so it was pretty quickly I started discovering anything and everything down at the Christian bookstore, going in and, just experimenting, listening to things. I wasn't really reading a lot of reviews yet because I don't think they existed too much in those days yet. At least I didn't know about them. And I was very taken. I was taken with, it was alluring to me because I was trying to grow in my faith as a very young man, and really wanting to find my footing both spiritually and musically now that I've found an alternative to what I was hearing on the radio. But I haven't even touched on the find of alternative music yet, but that's, we can go down that road later.
John, so when did you kind of, or maybe you didn't, maybe you just like it all? Because back in, the early Christian rock music days, we kind of liked it all at the beginning.
Very true.
Mm-hmm. And I was kind of like Todd. I was at the bookstore, especially when I discovered the more alternative, I wouldn't even have called it that in the early 80s, but I just liked what I heard, and I knew the sound that I liked as far as some of the secular bands, So I was down at the Christian bookstore, like if it had a cover that was interesting to me, I would buy it probably, and sometimes hate it, and be like, "Oh, you bait and switch." but that's what I was doing. But for you, Tom, like, when did you kind of focus in on the alternative aspect? That part of the Christian rock scene.
Is that for John? For me?
It's for you, John.
Oh, yep. Okay. So I'm going to reference a concert that I went to in 1982. And at that time, I think it was called the Anaheim Convention Center. I forget if it was after I started the radio program or just before that, but my friend who gave me all this Christian rock vinyl to play, he said, hey, there's going to be an event, and it's sponsored by Calvary Chapel of Costa Mesa, and the pastor, Chuck Smith, is inviting a bunch of the bands from the early 70s that started the Jesus movement. And do you want to go? And I said, sure. I wasn't doing anything. And I'm pretty sure Love Song played. I'm pretty sure Mustard Seed Faith played, probably The Way, and other bands that I wasn't really, a big fan of. But at the end of this event, Chuck was just about to release everyone to go home. And he said, hey, hold on. This is not on the program. We have one last band I'd like you to hear. I want to introduce you to 4 young men, and their name is Undercover. The band name is Undercover. This was 82, and so we went from Love Song to 4 guys who had spiky hair and tattoos and piercings and ripped jeans, and it was just like they started, I forget what song they played, but we were just sitting there with our mouths wide open. It's like, who is this? And why is Chuck doing this to us? But it was actually, we're like, whoa, we can listen to this. This is okay. And at the time, we all just assumed this was what Christian punk was. And that just blew my mind. And with everyone else in the arena, it was a sold out day. I mean, and there were a lot of people that just left, probably just shaking their heads. And I'm not sure what everyone else was thinking. But I don't think they released their first album yet. I think sometime in '82 they did release their debut album. But eventually, I walked into one of the Christian bookstores. I think it was Berean Christian Stores, and I saw God Rules in the bin. And I picked it up and I looked at it, I turned it over, and that artwork is pretty wild. And I was just like, okay, this is that band.
1, 2, 3, 4. Last time water, this time fire. Dave's getting down to the wire. I've heard Jesus walking down, I'm tired. God is true and men are liars. God rules. God rules. God rules. God rules. Hey, God rules. Jesus helped me day and night. He took my sins and flushed them right out of here. Devil off the fight. Jesus won with power and might. God rules. God rules. God rules. God rules. Hey, God rules. This world of life been getting stoned and sitting in the twilight zone. He isn't going to take us home. Don't be left around alone. God rules. God rules. God rules. Hey, God rules.
I think I saw that album before I saw their debut album, and I'm like, I'm going to buy this and I'm going to play it. And I don't care what parents do if they call in. They're going to probably tell their kids, you can't listen to us anymore. But that was like, that year, '82 was wild. That was wild.
Cool.
That's cool.
Awesome. So how did you guys first connect and decide to work on this project? I've heard you talk about it on the Orphans podcast, but just kind of, give us a nutshell, because there's a lot of people listening to this that don't even listen to Christian music. So just kind of.
Hey, I'm leaving this.
I'm out.
Todd, do you want to take that first?
Sure. I mean, I'll do the setup because I think this is
You should have it memorized by now, right?
I know. Well, I mean, I think this is what it comes down to, guys. I think ultimately I've had an involvement with some bands like Adam Again, Mike Knott, very peripheral in the sense of, am I in there shooting, Dove Award nominated music videos? No, but I have done little projects here and there over the years. Just so I've always been kind of like this guy, satellite, because I love the music. I've been on the peripheral scene for a lot of years, but I've always been very interested. Once I became, I guess, professional in my, once I went pro as a videographer back when, and I started getting gear and, business loans and all those things 25 years ago, I was just always very, very interested in figuring out ways I could do something to just put the music I love out there any way I could, right? So if that meant shooting a show, bringing my camera, if that meant helping out with this or that, doing some editing or whatever. So I always kind of wanted to give back to those artists because I love them dearly and really treasure what they mean to me in my own upbringing of faith. Music has always been vitally important. And so I would say once we lost Gene Eugene back in 2000, Greg Lawless, who had become a dear friend of mine, he's the guitarist, lead guitar player for Adam Again. We had been friends already quite a few years because we both live in Oregon. And he invited us to create a little encore video for Cornerstone 2000, which was the Gene Eugene tribute show. And he said he would like it to be one song and one song only, and that is River on Fire. So we had already shot back in 97, 99, some different footage with Gene. With Gene's blessing, we had set out for a project, kind of very indie on Adam Again, way back when. So I had a lot of footage just sitting there. And I was like devastated, of course, like many of us were when we lost Gene and then later Paul. So we put together this, what I felt was a pretty beautiful video considering the circumstances, considering what we had to work with, both gear-wise and footage-wise. And it proved, we got the band's blessing on it. And when Greg was putting together the tribute show, it played as the encore song. And many folks have reached out over the years saying, hey, I was standing in the audience, there was weeping. And I was there, of course, filming it as well, the performance and whatnot. But, I was weeping. It meant a lot to us. And so that's very special to me. And it's a dear memory of that era of Adam again and Gene especially.
What would you say if you knew what I was thinking? Maybe you do, but you know not to dig too deep. What if I knew what you needed for sure? I've seen in your eyes you need more, much more. And I could be happy and you could be miserable. I'll grab a metaphor out of the air. The Cuyahoga River on fire. What can you say? The impossible happens. What can you settle for? What can you live without? I remember the night I first darkened your door, and I swore that I loved you. My heart was pure. You could be happy and I could be miserable. I'll grab a metaphor out of the air. The Cuyahoga River on fire. My fingers, your face, a spark, a trace. I could be happy and you could be miserable. I'll grab a metaphor out of the air. The Cuyahoga River on fire. I know a lot about the history of Cleveland, Ohio, disasters that have happened there. Like the Cuyahoga River on fire.
I post it every once in a while just as kind of a, reminder and thank you for what Gene and the band gave to us musically and the legacy they leave. And so John had gotten his eyes on that a few years back when I posted it. And as far as I recall, John reached out maybe through Instant Messenger or something on Facebook, if I recall. But take it from there, John. There's your setup.
So that's exactly what I remember happening. I had seen Todd's name on Facebook. I'd seen some of his comments on different posts over the years. But I definitely, when I first saw that video that he produced, I'm like, wow, this is really, really cool. And so when the idea came to me, and if you want me to get into how that idea came to me, I can briefly just share that it was through the Jesus Music film, the Amy Grant and Michael W. Smith, Nashville production. My partner in crime from the radio days, Jason Dean, he said, hey, this is showing in Redlands at Harkins Theater. Do you want to go? And I said, yeah, let's go. So we walked out of the theater, and he's like, what'd you think? Did you like it? I said, yeah. What'd you think? He said, yeah, we both really liked the film. At the same time, though, with an asterisk, yeah, it was, they could have included some of our bands, but I didn't expect that to happen. But I think it was the next day, I posted something on Facebook. Hey, we saw the Jesus Music film. We thought it was really cool. What do you guys think? Who saw it? And some of our, I won't name any names, but some of the band members in this alternative movement were like, oh man, that sucked, because they just completely left us out. They were a little bummed out about that.
Right.
Which I understood. I understood that. And there was some back and forth. Some people said, hey, I need to go see that. And well, I'll name one person from Undercover said, oh, I'm never going to see that movie. It's like, okay, we get it. It's not for everybody. We understand it's not for everybody. And I went to bed thinking, okay, that's that. Never really imagining that one day I might be part of a team that goes to work on a film about that. And so here we are. But the first thing I did was I had dinner with another member from one of these bands, and we talked about why. Do you think someone's going to make a film about that movement, about what was going on in the 80s and 90s with alternative Christian music? And I don't know, but I think maybe someone should. Maybe it should be us. And so I said, I can't do anything about this because I don't know film. I've never done editing. I don't have any equipment. I don't have that experience. But I think I know who does. And Todd was the first and only name that came to mind. And I said, you know what? We should give him a call the next morning. And we did that. And we had another call a few days after that, or a week after that. And Todd was not only very open, but I think you said at one point that you had that idea in your mind as well. And actually, come to find out, there are a few different entities that had attempted a film like this. And I can now understand why they didn't finish it. This is a lot. Well, a lot to wrap our minds and our hands around. This is quite a story, right? So, but we're still here. We're still here.
One quick comment onto John's, to add on to John's, and thank you for that, John. I really just want the audience to know and you all to know, and I know I've shared this with John, but I've wanted to do something like this about specifically the Southern California scene, the alternative Southern, out of Southern California, the Green Room and the various hubs, so on. I have wanted to do something like that for years, but it's so all-encompassing and gargantuan and a huge undertaking. And, here I couldn't even get, a little tiny one-band Adam Again film off the ground successfully because of a lot of personal obstacles at the time. But that being said, I had the exact same feeling that probably all four of us on the screen had about the film, the Jesus Music film. It was inspiring, it was beautiful, it was gorgeously done, and it was great storytelling. And I loved it. I really enjoyed it. But I walked away with the exact same feeling of a little, if I'm being honest, hollowness, a little emptiness, a little bit like, I know they didn't have time to go into that alternative scene. This is a CCM film. I totally get it. But man, not even like an honorable mention, of some of the artists that created such a major stir. And so many of those artists in the CCM world did brush shoulders at festivals on the regular. So I found it odd from a storytelling perspective and a music fan perspective. Like, really? No Terry Taylor? No Daniel in this? You know, I mean, what's wrong with this picture? So in my heart of hearts, I was like, dang, I hope one day somebody can pull superpowers together. And thank the Lord, John was thinking the same thing, as many others were as well. I mean, I've talked to countless people and artists who said, gosh, yeah, we love that film. But
so that reminds me, before I went to bed, at the end of, going back and forth with people about the movie we had just seen, the final thing I typed was something like, at the end of the day, if we want the film to happen that we're talking about, someone's just going to have to do it. And I went to bed and I slept really well, and not knowing that, today would come so soon. And so I mentioned the word team. So obviously it's going to take more than the two of us to put a film together. And
absolutely,
if I can jump ahead a little bit, because we're talking now about, I'm sitting next to really one of the next people we invited to be on this team, and his name is Chad. And Chad has become a very big part of what this movie is becoming, and he is known as many things. He digitizes just about everything anyone sends to us, having to do with like concert flyers or band photographs, or he also is going after people that he thinks might have memorabilia that we haven't seen yet. And so he is part of almost a dozen people on this film project, and I want to hear from him if you guys are
Sure.
open to that right now, just because I think he's probably getting a little bored over here.
Let's bring him in and let's skip into.
He's going to take my seat. Okay?
Absolutely.
Section. Yeah, because I've been wanting to bring him on camera as well. He is a huge asset to this project, this film.
Well, hi there.
So, do you want me to give you a little backstory about how I got into this real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
So mine is kind of family oriented. Chuck Cummings is my cousin.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay.
He married my cousin Tony, and that's how I got into somewhat learned about this. I'm a little bit younger. I'm 50 years old, so I was going to shows just because it was at Knott's Berry Farm or wherever, or like, hey, you want to come go to a show when he was back in Common Bond and all that. Got to see a couple of those bands like Prayer Chain and all that very early, but I was still elementary school age, so I was like, okay, whatever, And then later on, I got into video editing, and then, of course, my cousin Chuck got into a band called the Ultrabillies, Mike Stand. Mm-hmm. So I begged and begged. I'm like, please let me shoot a video for you guys. And so he talked to Mike, and Mike said, sure. I was going to the same church as Mike Stand, and never really met him. So, it's the Ultra Boys, okay. And so we're shooting the first video that I did for him, Still Standing. And so I got in the car with Mike, and it's like a 3-hour drive. We're just driving out there. We have no clue what we're doing. And it's just me as the crew. I'm the only guy out there filming the whole thing. And so we had a 3-hour drive, and so I got to talk to Mike, and he was telling me a story about like, hey, the second wave. And like, oh, this is cool. You should make a movie, da-da-da. And my thing is, I looked at it and like, oh man, this is a lot of work. Forget it, But the thing is, I got to know Mike, and we kind of hit it off with Mike, and so he became a dear friend of mine. And that's how I kind of got involved. Was I did a little quick documentary for GLM reissue that came out on Girder Records a few years back, and so he asked me to do that for him. So I did that, and that's how I kind of met Todd, because Todd's like a video guy. He's like, hey, we kind of hit it off.
We did hit it off, and that was a few years back. I mean, long before us kids. And I know we started talking on the phone, Chad and I, just, from a kind of archivist, preserving this history, and he does great work. And, didn't you go to film school too, as well?
Kind of, but the thing is, I had better stuff at home than the film school offered. So
I remember that. Yeah, we've talked about this.
I'm more of a hands-on kind of guy.
Yeah.
As you can see some of my stuff here. So since COVID, I've been buying equipment, and I have every kind of format I can pretty much do. So
two things. Chad not only digitizes scans, it's every tape format under the sun. And those who go back to the analog days of tape know what I'm talking about. Yeah. Chad knows how to fix tapes. He knows how to buy some old VCR that somebody's selling for $20, and he can turn it into a working, it's from 1982 or what have you. And this is broadcast equipment. The guy is a whiz, not just technically speaking, but he's also a great shooter, editor, all the above. But we hit it off like on that side where like A lot of people are saying, "Oh, Todd, you got the latest GX 912, with a 4-banger under the hood for a camera," and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm not a tech guy. I'm not really that guy. I'm not a gearhead. I'm just not." And Chad is like so good about being patient with people. He works with all kinds of clients, and he's invaluable to this project because he has become not only a dear friend and a brother in Christ, but like he's such an asset because he works in fair rates with us, and he knows this is a very independent labor of love that we've been doing for years. And so we really hit it off. Like, I admired his work, so I think I reached out to him. We started talking on the phone pretty regularly and became friends. But I'm just saying this film would not be what it is without his stamp in it, and it's going to be all over it because we've had him find things that we didn't know existed. We've got footage of LSU performing as LSU for the very first time on stage, when they changed their name. And we've got so much valuable footage that is like footage and photographs and magazine articles, just archival. He's the official archivist for the film, absolutely, but then so much more. So he's also just a great storyteller. And, we talk about all the latest documentaries we're watching. So huge asset. So thank you for all you do, Chad. I mean that.
Yeah, you're hitting something that a lot of people don't realize. That piece, in doing something like this, they don't realize that. I'm sure you got all sorts of footage from all sorts of people, but what do you do with it, right? How do you get it to where it needs to be, right? Right. So that's like, and a lot of people just aren't even going to think about that,
John wasn't thinking about that.
I'm really thinking about anything. Yeah.
Well, let's just put it this way. So once in a blue moon, we'll ask one of the artists who are graciously giving us their time, or maybe opening up their archives, and they're like sending us text messages with a photograph they took on their phone of a photo album. Hey, can this work in the film? We're like, Chad, you want to tell them how it is?
Yeah, so I kind of work with them, and I've got to meet some of the band members and all that. And honestly, 3 years ago, or whenever we started this, I would only know like the Altar Boys. That was pretty much it. And any band that my cousin Chuck played in,
the 10 bands that he was a part of.
10 bands.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Because here, one thing I did is like when I first met Mike on that drive, I think that's why we became good friends. Is like I said, hey, I went to one of the shows at Knott's Berry Farm New Year's Eve, and I got to saw you guys perform. I thought you guys were amazing. And then the next day I went to the Christian bookstore, and I listened to they had the listening station. So I'm listening to the album like, this is not the Altar Boys. This is not good. So I didn't buy it. And I told him that, and he goes, oh yeah, that was probably our latest album, Forever Mercy. So it was, So, but the thing is, I learned the
I'll
Altar
make
Boys.
no comments about that album.
Yeah. Well, I like it. There was good stuff on there. Now
I don't hate it,
but as a kid, I like a punk rock. I was like, they're amazing in concert, and I did, that album doesn't translate live,
Yes.
Yeah. Cool.
Snow against the grain.
Right.
Oh no.
When you were a boy, they said you were no good. And you tried, but it never was enough. Now with all this on your head, I'm not surprised at the hate and pain showing in your eyes. You're a victim! When it starts to shove, you always shove right back. Any way to use the pressure, you attack. That seems to satisfy a need. It's a hunger that you just got to feed. You're a victim of a heart lost to nowhere. Heart lost to nowhere.
And I have a digitizer here in Eugene, Oregon. So the guy named Daryl Poor, he works with me. He's been a huge alternative fan for years. I won't go into all his backstory, but he also does a ton on this end because I'm pulling in people from Portland, Oregon, who give me boxes of things. Salem, Oregon. Mike Norman is Larry Norman's son is an hour away from me. We meet up for coffee, and he hands me off a box of things. So we have stuff going on all the time for this film. So people just don't realize how much back behind the scenes work goes into this until they're really in it, and we are so in it. So
Yeah, I can only imagine, because Jim and I know a level of that, like a really tiny level. How many hours is behind, an hour that you put out? So
Yeah.
in your case, like it's even greater amount of work and information and transfer and editing and all that stuff and decision making, and stuff like that. So I had a question that's not on my list. So were you guys surprised at the amount of stuff that you got, footage and photos and everything? Did you get way more than you even anticipated?
Do you realize that this question you just asked could easily take up an hour? But I'm going to have Todd start off. Yeah.
I would say this. I always feel like more is better. Now, have I done a 2-hour full-length documentary? No, I've not delivered the goods on something of that stature and that size. So therefore, I knew what I thought we might need, or, it's like projection. We're talking about it, rewind 2.5 years ago when John and I first began talking in this collaboration. I knew what I had a picture of, what I'd like to see happen, to know I edit day in and day out projects for clients all day long. That's my bread and butter work. But I also had this vision of, okay, well, maybe if we really reach out to the artists and become a little bit of a pest, and we might put the word out, on our Facebook page and talk to the fans, because occasionally you'll find a fan who's like, oh, I got a 3 shoe boxes of great photos that were used in Harvest Rock Syndicate, and they'd hire me, and, on the story goes. And so I was like, I had an idea of what we might need. I thought we might need. I would say, honestly, I want Chad to chime in because he's seen way more than we have in this piece of the project. And I would say we probably received 5 to 8 times more than I imagined we might need. That's what I would gather. Mm-hmm. There's so much. There will be part of, and this is something I think I've shared with John, but maybe I haven't. Chad and I speak about it more directly, I would say. Regularly. And that is, as we got deeper into this and more fans and artists would find something or pull something, come forward, and we make the connection. Chad's got a huge package of magazines that a fan wants to donate for the film. He's out of Canada. He had high shipping rates because he has so many of them. They're en route right now as we speak to Chad for scanning. Now, fans, these are beloved artists to these fans. And so they want to help. They want to, and it's all for a name in the credits. It's not fame and fortune. It's just to help us out. And we love that. And that has been amazing. So fans and artists have come forward with so much great quality, memorabilia. And I think that will make the film better, stronger in the storytelling, the era, but also what we decided as we gathered more and more and more is we're like, hey, no one has a digital archive. I will mention Tim Hudson, who started a great project called Bleed Into One some years back that got, derailed for a multitude of reasons. He's been wonderful, and he shared a lot of his, own work with us and interviews and whatnot and archival footage. And so that got Chad and I thinking, well, we should just keep duplicates and then some, and we're going to build this huge archive. So when somebody else comes along and says, hey, Daniel Amos is doing a full-length, feature-length documentary, what did you guys gather during that? And we will gladly share. I put that out, on record. Anyone who is going to chase down an endeavor like this, we have nothing but respect and admiration, and we want to help by saying, here's what we have. We're willing to share with you, here's the person who gets credited, et cetera, and they have to chase down all their, sign-offs and whatnot on their own. But that's something that I think we're kind of developing a library, I would say, of these artists. You know? Yeah.
So if I can jump in here, and we mostly so far we've been talking about, when we say memorabilia, visual things, whether they're photos or magazine covers or album covers. The other part of this movie, which we haven't really touched on yet, has to do with who I'm having breakfast with tomorrow. While we're sort of running down the other people on this team, I do not want to forget to mention a woman named Adele. And if I try and pronounce her last name, I always butcher it. So we're just going to call her Adele, but she owns Frontline Records. So at one point, she purchased the company that Jimmy Kempner once owned. And she runs that company. She manages that company. And let me just say that Adele is an angel, because what we now have at our disposal is the entire catalog of what she manages and owns as far as songs and albums. When she heard about this film, she said, look, what I want to do is I want to offer to you guys whatever songs, if we own it, whatever you want to use in the film, we're not going to charge you the normal publishing licensing fees. And I was like, if we had not had Adele in our corner saying that, doing that for us, this might have been like one of those silent films,
Right.
because we already are aware of what type of a budget we would need to have to actually purchase the rights to songs. So if it's going to be a music documentary, it's sort of nice to have music, and we have Adele to thank. By the way, I'm going to have breakfast with Adele tomorrow morning at 9, and we do this every so often. I just give her some updates, and we've become friends. And it's sort of nice to be a friend of an angel, and that's she's just amazing.
We love Adele, and she has been nothing but gracious and helpful and professional and so giving. And I think she has a similar love for these artists. She wants to preserve the nostalgia, preserve the legacy of these great artists. She's not releasing brand new records. She's not a new record label. She's a preservationist, an archivist, of some of the great music. And once again, I will give, the higher power, to quote my mother, this one's for you, Ann Zeller, to thank God Almighty. My mother likes to say that a lot. I just thank God Almighty for the orchestration of the right people at the right time at the right price for this entire project. And that's where we are doing so much with so little. And I don't mean that. That's not a slam to our budget. That is simply to say we are doing a lot more than most would because we have a great, great team behind us of individuals who have caught the vision and a similar vision to ours. They've seen the need for years to speak more about preserving the great, great stories and the great legacy of these groundbreaking artists who were pioneers, just like the Jesus People music before them. They are pioneers. They are builders of something that maybe they didn't know what they were building in the moment, in the 1980s. And by mid-90s, things were splintering and they were changing and they were evolving and people were leaving and record labels were closing down and being bought out. All the heartbreak that's involved in that for the artists, we hope to really share some of their story. I mean, if you will, that's for no better choice of words than we hope to tell their story, and we will do our best to tell it well. And we thank everyone else involved in that, including you guys, for giving us another platform.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good to have you.
A number of comments you've made, including this one about Adele, kind of hit on a question I skipped over on accident, but it was really like one of the most important questions for me in these discussions, just because I've talked to a lot of different friends, over the years about this, and it's just like this really neat, unique subculture around the early Christian alternative music. And it's like, I don't think you can describe it to anybody who wasn't affected by it. I don't know how you guys feel. I feel like I feel sorry for people, almost like that don't have this.
Yeah.
And I've thought a lot about it. I've talked a lot about it. Like, why was it so, inspirational and informative for me, just in my viewpoint in life and stuff like that? Because I have a lot of thoughts, but I don't want to share my thoughts on it. I want to hear what you guys' thoughts are, how this shared identity, how did it shape your viewpoints and this feeling of camaraderie among fans, that they're willing to do things, like support this way. What are your thoughts about that, John?
Well, yeah, that's another hour-long question. I would love to spend 60 minutes, but I know we don't have that much time. But that's this could easily take the rest of the evening, because it sort of goes to a question that we've all been wondering: who is our target audience for this film? And whenever you do a work, whether it's a record album or a book or a movie, completing that project is the first thing. But then what do you do with the project? Who do you think would want to see or hear or read that project? The only thing I can come up with right now for sure is the people who were there. So people who were living up in the Northern California area that had access to the warehouse, to Exit Records label, to the artist like Charlie Peacock, like the 77s, like Vector, people who were in Southern California, who lived in that area back in the 80s and 90s, that were able to go to the concerts, that were able to listen to from KYMS to KLRD, which was the station that I went on after finishing up with KUOR. But here's the thing. Obviously, those are going to be people interested in this movie. I believe, and it's not a for sure knowledge thing, but I just believe that once that target audience sees the film, they're going to say, hey, were you around? Are you familiar with this music? Because if you're not, you might want to check out this movie. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I would just add that I was pleasantly surprised. We had some financial support early on. We have some executive producers that are involved on the back end of things, of course, behind the scenes. We have a lot of generous folks with both financial and I think their love and support. And to your original point, Jimmy, is just that for me, it harkens back to that camaraderie of me and a carload of some of my dearest friends, me saying, try not to get choked up. Guys, girls, how many cars can we get? There is a 77 show at the warehouse this Friday night. We didn't get the text message sent out on our way en route that, oh shoot, the sevens can't play tonight until we get to the show. And instead, we've got this band called Charlie Peacock, and it's a guy you might know playing guitar with him from Vector. And basically, it was like Charlie Peacock with Vector. It's like it was Vector, basically, but Charlie was doing his songs at the time with a mix of some Vector. And I already loved Vector at the time. So I said, oh, man, to all my friends, I'm so sorry it's not the Sevens, who I'm sort of selling you on, making mixtapes, cassettes, and handing them out at school. And that same kind of camaraderie, they were like, oh, we love that show. It was so much fun. We had, now I've turned on some new people to some other artists. And that was kind of my odd little, outsider underdog way of sharing the gospel through this music. And I feel personally like there's very much a strong sense of that kind of camaraderie that we got and we felt in the 80s if you grew up there in those scenes. Because whether you were a person of faith or not, the faith side of it was great. That brought people together already. There was a natural commonality. But music draws people in. It doesn't push people out. It draws them into the location, into the music club, into the church, into the Coliseum, wherever, the arena. And I think there's a similar vibe for me among people that I didn't know before this film existed. People I maybe knew a name from Facebook because I belonged to a couple of groups or this or that. But I feel like the artists have pulled together and pulled closer for us. And via some of the, the video shoots, I've spoken about this in a few other places, but it was so heartwarming and uplifting and satisfying, fulfilling to see artists who hadn't seen each other maybe in a few years or maybe longer, big hugs and reminiscing while they're waiting for their turn at a location for an interview. They're having a meal over there on the side, but they're talking about that time they all played, in Europe somewhere at a festival and some mishap that went happen, to see the smiles for John and I and the other people in the crew, to see the mutual appreciation, respect, and admiration and love, honestly, that exists. Here's the crazy thing, guys, is that I get so overwhelmed with emotion on this because the film is not out yet, because no one has seen it. It's not so much about that, oh, this is going to be the greatest story in the world. It probably isn't. It's just going to be another music documentary. But guess what? Made with a lot of love and a lot of admiration out of a place of genuine gratitude to say, thank you. Thank you, artists. We want to preserve your legacy. Thank you, fans and crew and people who pulled together to help us make this happen. So to me, that sense of camaraderie, that spirit of teamwork, and I mean, that's the church in my mind. That is the church at its best, is when people are brought together over some common goal.
Yeah, it's like you guys created a family reunion, and everybody's getting together. And I, for myself, I see the post, I see your feed and stuff like that. Even when I fill in the blanks with what I'm thinking in my head, like what these get-togethers are like and interviews, that's almost as fulfilling for me as when I see this film, at some point. That's almost as meaningful. I just thinking about that and what you're talking about, knowing that's happening, for all these bands that I know of and grew up with and, enjoyed. And so
I appreciate hearing that.
Cool.
No, I appreciate hearing that. And I know John does too, but I'll even liken it to this. I'll go one step further. Remember that great feeling as a teenager, or maybe you're, young adult, college age, and you're going to one of your favorite band shows, and there's that kind of the afterglow, right, if you will, where they're coming off stage, and then maybe there's a merch table or somebody's in the crowd, and you get a chance to hang out or talk with them and introduce yourself to them or whatever. That kind of high, that hot musical high that exists, I honestly believe we're continuing to see that behind the scenes. I mean, that's my take, is it's a musical high that pulls people together. And I just love that God is blessing it richly thus far.
Let me sort of go way out beyond the box and say this. Imagine if something were to happen and we were not able to finish this film for whatever reason. That's not going to happen. But if that were to happen, I would look back on these last 2.5 years with zero regrets for what we have gone through, for what we have experienced, for what has happened to us while we have been attempting to finish a film, because Todd knows what I'm talking about. I'd be good. I'd be good with that, because we have been so blessed along the way. So blessed. Now, that's not what we want to have this story, end. Please don't. Fade to black. No, Todd and I fully intend to finish what we started. Yes. But all I'm saying is, this has been quite a ride. It's been quite a ride.
Amen. It has. And let me just add one final thought. The artists themselves over this short span, hey, none of us are getting younger, any younger. We're all of a similar age bracket within a, give or take 10 to 20 perhaps. But that being said, a lot of our artists, we've seen them face health challenges, life hardships, literally in the timing of, we are here and we are ready to shoot and you have a slot. Now there's something has happened and we have to roll with it, and we have. And thankfully, our artists have been, again, so giving, so gracious, so willing to go the extra mile, because this is their story. And again, I'm going to go out on a limb. There is no one else at this juncture in time knocking down our doors or theirs. Some of them maybe have their own thing in the works as a band. Sure, that's great. I highly want to see that happen. But they're not knocking on, hey, let me tell your story. We want to come to you. We want to tell your story. And that's unfair. That is a travesty in my book. The talent that exists in this stable of artists is immense. It's immense. And the songs and the legacy and the pain and labor and, marriage troubles and tour troubles and financial challenges, all the things that went into their life of music, their chosen road, and what they gave us out of it. It's a piece of their soul. That's not lost on me.
You said people aren't knocking down your door to tell the story, or their door. Why do you feel that? Why do you think that is?
I think it's just they were never given the real shot that they needed because of lack of support, both maybe it's label, financial, whatever it is. People a lot of times in this industry, sadly, as we all kind of know, I think it starts out as it's like when you get a puppy dog. The puppy is great at first and you love it. And then it starts growing and it starts barking and maybe it wants to bite you now and then and becomes harder to manage because it's more mature as a dog now, full grown. And I got to get rid of it. I can't deal with this anymore. It's too expensive. It's too much trouble. It's too much this, too much that. A lot of these artists have been shortchanged in their career by labels, by people, by individuals. And I'm not saying that's some kind of root of bitterness, but it is a source of hardship for these artists. And I think the fact that no one's knocking down their door because they are not in touch, like the four of us who lived some of this as music buyers and fans and concert goers or radio hosts or promoters, concert promoters, any number of things. The world outside of this little bubble, they just didn't see the potential that we all did see and appreciate it. Now, granted, some of the bands have gotten, lots of critical acclaim, and they deserve it 100%. Those ones that did get some mention in some of the great magazines and things, everything from Spin to local, print and whatnot, reviews and whatnot. And they deserve that. I'm so glad that some of the artists broke out of the bubble. I mean, God bless them, because that's what needed to happen years ago, but they didn't have the kind of support. I think we'll tell a piece of that story to some degree. That's a whole nother story arc. But
yeah, would you, is it fair to say that you want to, part of your goal is to give them an opportunity to have a voice and to share?
Absolutely. See, we needed that one line right there in our elevator pitch because that was perfect. Seriously, that's great. That's it. Exactly, in a nutshell.
From the very beginning, I was of the mind that I did not want a narrator for this film. I didn't think we
He
would.
was. I can vouch for that. I suggested a narrator originally, and he talked me out of it.
Oh, okay. And another thing about Todd and I, that we work really well together. Do we agree on everything? No, but as a partnership that is moving forward, we figure out how to get around those times.
We do.
But so I really felt like this story would not need either one of us or a third party to come in and share bits and pieces about how we feel about what was going on back then, because we have so much footage of the artists speaking, and we tried to come up with questions that we would get those things out of them, and that was not very difficult to do. That these artists really shared from their heart whatever they could remember. It's sort of funny. One of the artists said, "Well, who's gonna fact check?" And thankfully, you don't need to fact check.
That's going to be Chad. That's
exactly.
Right. We could probably hire somebody, but here's the thing about, you don't need a fact checker for people's memories. So one artist is going to remember a different thing about a certain concert than the other artist, right? No, this is a story about people's memories as far as the artists go. And we're talking 40, 45 years ago, some of these concerts, these shows. I don't even remember, a lot of what was going on back then.
Right.
So we certainly don't need a narrator to piece this together. They will do that for us. And I'm really excited about how that's going to come together. And we're still working on, the final editing. This is not anywhere, we're probably at least 4 or 5 months away from having a rough draft.
Yes. That's exactly it. And let me say one more. That's a great point, John, that you made. Absolutely. I appreciate hearing that. I would say, one piece of vital information. This is not an exact, linear storytelling timeline of things. It's not like, here's the historical, you know what I mean? And there's elements of that in the doc, of course, to help set things up, but it's not that. It's more about getting behind the music in many ways, I would say. Of course, we're focusing on the songs and the music. It's a huge part of it. That's why we're doing this film. But at the same time, I always felt like, as a listener, I want to get to know the people behind these great songs, this great playing. Yes. And I think where John was going is we were hoping to create a platform that allows some of that to unfold naturally, organically. And I think we have a lot of that, an immense amount of that. So now it's just putting the puzzle pieces together so that it is the most powerful, so that it is the most resonant, in the sense of, everybody has their various stories. And it's funny because I'm editing away on interviews and things, and we've got our transcripts and whatnot that we're pulling from. But occasionally I'm like, okay, well, this guy's telling that story, and then she's talking about that same story. Wait a second. Yeah. One of them's called it this place, the other one's called it that place. Yeah. So clearly there's a little bit of a, and no fault whatsoever, no judgment at all. Simply saying that we have enough to make these stories engaging, because here's back at the heart of this film, these bands loved each other. That's why they're still occasionally playing music together or doing a reunion show. I mean, who's going to some Prayer Chain or Poor Old Lou, in the coming months? It's great to see these artists still getting together and joining together for a new song, a new record, a stage. Doesn't matter. It's still happening today, 40, 45 years later.
Todd, let me jump off on that, because that is such a great point that we want to make, is that this scene is still happening. Not only the Prayer Chain, we've got Mortal, we have, in our film, we interviewed both Gyro and Jerome. Jerome's from Switchfoot. Well, Switchfoot just played in Ukaipa, which is near where I went to college. I mean, they are still a band that tours regularly. Joe Taylor from Undercover just finished his second solo album. I mean, they're still recording new music. This is there's a lot going on this year. The Lost Dogs, speaking of T-shirts, we're gonna get new vinyl from them before the end of the year. This is wild.
Amen to that.
Same with 77s.
77s, Prayer Chain.
There's a lot going on this year with our tribe. Yeah.
I wanted to jump back just real quick because I really, really liked what you talked about, perspectives and fact checking. We talked about that a little bit, and I really like what you talking about as far as these are people. They have different perspectives, different memories.
Yes.
I was thinking, because Jim and I have interviewed three members of the church, and we've talked about certain situations that they each have a different perspective on it's completely different. And I don't think I told you this, Jim, but I was thinking about, like, when I was a kid, you would watch those old sitcoms when they would have something that happened, and then they would have each character like replay it, their version of it.
Right.
I don't know if you remember any of those. They'd have those dream sequences, and they'd be like, this person, this is what happened. And then this next person, and it's like, they're way different, but they're kind of, they have some truth.
Right. It's how they remembered it.
Yeah.
But I think this music was so real. Like, they were transparent.
Very transparent.
And that was part of why they were, pushed away and not, given the platform. And so I think you hitting on that, I think, is really important for this. We want to hear their voices and their perspectives. So it's not about fact checking. It's about hearing them.
I love what you just said about being pushed away. Okay, there is definitely an element of that. And many of us know a lot of those stories that have transpired over the years. But here's the gold nugget, and that's this. These artists are still grateful for the scene. They don't have the regrets. Right. And you're going to hear from somebody, again and again throughout the film, voicing their gratitude, man. I mean, some of these guys, I won't give too much away, but just simply saying, some of these artists, men and women who gave their all to their art for the sake of Christianity, whatever the message, however you want to frame it, I don't really care. Point being, they were all in. They were not a part-timer here or there. Maybe later in life they had to be, because that's just the nature of that unbelievable game they entered into, that arena of independent labels folding and larger labels swallowing up others and cutting them loose. Who knows what? Or, being stiffed at a gig, or being stiffed, what they were owed, or this or that.
Yeah.
Simply to say that I think at the end of the day, these artists show an extreme level of spiritual maturity and growth over their lifetime. And that was really amazing for me as a fan, a music fan of these folks, but also as a storyteller, to see where they are today, who they've become, how these songs and experiences have shaped them into the person they are. And that speaks volumes to me as a person, as a believer. And I don't really care what their faith claim or lack of claim is today. I don't, because we're talking about an era, but we're talking about hearts and minds who gave us something that is lasting. And I think that's the beauty of film and storytelling, is simply, once again, it gives an opportunity and a platform to preserve. We are preservationists at the heart of this project, I would say, at least for myself, speaking for myself.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Is Steve Scott involved in this at all?
Better be.
So
He has to be.
I'm happy to speak to that only because the last time I finally got to meet Steve Scott face to face at our dear brother Randy Layton's memorial service, his celebration of life, not too long ago. Right. And Mike Rowe was there, and many other great folks. And I will say this: we have included some of the Sacramento Warehouse Exit Records scene, some of it, I say. Because that is a separate it's really a parallel story, very much so. But it's also such a big story with great players and great talent, including Steve Scott. I love Steve Scott. I just got another CD I didn't have very recently from, is it Gord Wilson? I want to say. I hope I'm not getting my names mixed up. Anyways, another Steve Scott record that I don't have because I love his music. I love his poetry. I love his vision. Steve is not included with an interview. The Exit Records story is not going to be even close to told in its entirety. There is some crossover of artists in both groups, but we are sticking to a smaller story. It's not a small story. That's a bad choice of words. We have to, because honestly, we would love to see another great story told of the Sacramento music scene, because it is a powerhouse in its own right. But the crossover is inevitable. It's undeniable. The talent and the players on each other's records and so on. So I say that with a little bit of regret that I wish we could have him on camera for a few words, but it's probably not going to happen.
Let me do a quick dovetail on that question. Sure. I really believe that two things will happen when people see this film. One of the things will be some viewers will have the same feelings that Jason and I had when we walked out of the theater after seeing the Jesus music film. They'd be like, wait a minute, where was Bloodgood? Where were the heavy metal bands? Where were, what happened to Scattered Few? The problem here is time.
It is.
That's the main problem. We don't want to have a 3 to 4 hour film. We're not going to do a docuseries. But here's the second thing that I believe will happen. After this film is released, that there will be some band members that are in the film, and they might see their, segment, little 5, 6, 7, 9-minute segment, and look at each other and go, you know what, it's time for us to do our documentary.
Yes.
There are, I believe, and I hope that this is going to be true, that there will be other films that sort of come out of this. And I've already heard rumors that, Todd may end up doing his dream film, Adam, again, and I believe that will happen. It's just a matter of how long that will take. He's going to need some time off after this film, I think. And there are some others that I'm hearing rumors about, which I won't share, but that would really please me, because look, how can a band like the 77s or Undercover or Altar Boys or Dakota Motor Company, how can these bands not have their own documentary? There's so much story there in just one of those bands, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and the discography too. You look at the discography of some of these artists that are, incredibly lengthy, and there's a lot to cover. Not that you have to go into every song by song in a documentary, but there's some great stories. And, Chad is kind of the official archivist for the Altar Boys. They're archiving of the media that they collected over the years of their career, as well as some other great artists who we just had come in on a hard drive yesterday. And I will mention a heavenly thank you to Michael Pritzel of the Violet Burning. I mean, he opened up his archives.
Oh, wow.
And God bless him. He has just done what many artists don't do, is he organized everything according to date and location, and it's very, very helpful. And I say that not with any kind of anything other than gratefulness, but I say it because it's a big undertaking for any artist to put these things together. Some of them live in different parts of the country now, and so on. But yeah, to John's point, we hope more documentaries will be made. We hope that this, I've said it numerous times before, but I won't hesitate to say it again. And that is, if John and I can sort of spearhead this project and gather the right people for the right jobs as needed and as necessary with the little, indie budget we have, then by golly, more should do it. And I highly recommend that. I'll stand behind that forever.
Yeah. It's only
and we'll help any way we can. Yeah. We'll help any way we can.
Any bands I really wanted to get this band, and they either didn't want to do it or just couldn't, or,
So yes, I have not spoken to this on the handful of podcasts we've done in the past, but I think I should tonight. And Mad at the World, I mentioned the radio program that I was involved with, but from that radio program, we started doing concerts. We started promoting concerts. We started booking bands, and we did what's called a mini fest once a year. And Mad at the World was booked one year for that. I think it was in '88. We did indoor benefit concerts, and Mad at the World was also involved in that concert series. And we played Mad at the World on our program, just every single album that came out. We invited them, like we did all the other bands, out to do the live radio show interview on the air. And sometimes, they bring an acoustic guitar. Randy and Roger, they were a big part of what we were doing, and they were definitely on our list of artists to contact. And I remember, I'll never forget the conversation I had with Randy one day. I called him and I told him about the film project. And this would have been a little over 2 years ago. And he at the time said, my dad's not doing well. And this is our priority right now. I'm not sure how that would work, but let's stay in touch. Well, a few months go by. I forget the exact timing, but their dad passed. And there was a lot of work at that point that they had to do. There was moving, there was and we just, for whatever reason, never were able to connect the dots. And that is one band that I'm just going to say, the band that got away.
Yeah.
Yes, wow. I would agree. I was a small part of those conversations as well. And, both the brothers would have enjoyed, I think, sharing in this grander story, but the timing just didn't work. And again, unlimited time, energy, and budget and people, it is limiting. And that is the reality without becoming a behemoth docuseries, and one day we hope there will be a docuseries of some sort, I will say the one that got away from me, and I want to share it because it's important to me anyways. I think early on in the early stages of gathering interviews and, who we would include and how much and so on, some of it was projecting, some of it was, we had a fairly strong idea of how we wanted to go about it. But that being said, at one point I thought, oh, well, sure, we got to get a hold of Tony Okay. We got to talk about What Records because that was so instrumental. We got to talk about Mark Hurd's Ideola, project and on tribal opera, and so on. So these sort of peripheral alternative artists from Southern California at the time. But then, of course, all of a sudden the list becomes very, very long. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could have a word on camera while we're down in Southern California for a week shooting interviews with, hired guns and people and cameras and all the gear to reach out to Sam Phillips and think, oh, well, I'd love to hear a little take on her experience, knowing that probably it wasn't very going to be very kind or very positive, perhaps. but I really wanted to hear about specifically her album, The Turning, and that transitional moment for her, why she wanted to leave, how that went, and where she is today. Just really that was her story in a nutshell. She also played on a lot of stages with these same artists that are in our film. And I reached out to her management company, I think booking agent or what have you, by email, and he emailed me back. He said, I forwarded this to Leslie directly. She will be reaching out to you. And I was pleasantly surprised. And I will cherish when I got a direct email from her a few days later saying, that era of my life and career is behind me. Really appreciate your asking. I appreciate your thinking of me for this project, but it's probably not my cup of tea, so I'm going to decline. However, because I think in my email to her, I had mentioned something about, Jerry Scott Taylor, Daniel Amos, Michael Rowe, the choir were on the list and had agreed to interviews at that point. And so she's pointed out several artists. She mentioned Terry Scott Taylor. She mentioned Michael Rowe. She said, the artists you named, and she kind of played them back in the email and just basically said, you are in good company with these artists who are so talented and so perfect for this story. And I love them. She said something to that effect. And I thought, how gracious and how sweet and thoughtful that she didn't just blow me off herself. She didn't have her management guy say, here's the blow off, copy and paste, letter we give people all the time. Yeah. And I was like, that meant a lot to me as a storyteller and as a fan of her work. And, respect her immensely on so many levels. But that being said, I just felt like there are many artists in our scene that we would have loved to have on board. So many. But again, it had to become probably a 3-part docuseries to make it work. I think John and I both agree that we never wanted to waste anyone's time. Like, hey, be a part of this, and you're only going to be in it for 30 seconds. You know what I mean? It's like, so it's a hard story to tell because there are so many great players in this scene.
This is really the most difficult part where we are at right now with the final editing going on, because we want to keep everybody and everything that they've said. But that's just not going to happen. Now, can I go back real quickly to Mad at the World? Because
please.
Okay. We have not brought this up yet, but there is going to be a soundtrack, a double vinyl soundtrack release in conjunction with this film.
I think I saw a post about it on Facebook, maybe.
And I don't really post that often about it because I'm not the one doing the soundtrack. I
was excited.
A lot of people are, and I mentioned my radio partner back in the day that did this radio program, Reality Rock, with me, and his name is Jason Dean. And we together, I think it was 3 years ago, came up with this double vinyl, sort of a retrospective, almost greatest hits from the Reality Rock collection. And it was called the Fourth Wave vinyl collection. And he is putting together, he's already selected all the bands and the songs. And we had several conversations early on, and we're like, well, does it have to be songs that are going to be in the film? And can we, go off script? And I'm like, dude, you know who these bands are and the songs you want. You do the album. You don't need any help from me. I trust you. And he reached out to Mad at the World and he said, hey, I know you guys aren't interviewed for the film, but we would love to have you on the soundtrack. Which song, should we do? And he will negotiate. He will have conversations about that. And sometimes he knows a song he wants and he'll ask permission. Sometimes he'll say, hey, which song would you, I don't want to speak for him, but we are very excited about this double vinyl soundtrack. And I'm not sure what other formats. I don't know if he's doing CD or not, but this is his project. But Mad at the World will be one of the 21 bands that will be on that soundtrack.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. In fact, I think I sent you a picture, Jim. Didn't I send you a picture when that post came out? It's like, oh, there's going to be a double vinyl.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, you don't read my text. I'm just joking.
Todd doesn't read
me
mine
on the
either,
spot.
So, yeah.
Jim's like, I text you way more than you text me.
Jimmy who?
I was really excited, though. That's why I remember. I was like, oh. This is the first I've heard of this.
Well,
I know about that.
We're glad at least someone is excited about that. No, I'm excited about it. I want that vinyl. I want the vinyl
as well.
For sure. Were there any unexpected challenges, technical, logistical, personal, that threatened to derail the project? Yeah.
Nothing to me comes to mind that threatened the project, that we can't do the project, that I recall anyways, thinking back. I think many moments it took a left turn or an unexpected direction, or this person came against, there's a surgery scheduled, an emergency surgery, and we have to work around that. Of course, John and I have been very flexible, on so many levels. And, not only is John producer, but he's the orchestrator of so many things on a regular basis, because he lives down amongst these artists, many of them, I should say, not all of them, but many of them, and spends time with them, one-on-one, which is great because I don't have that luxury. I can call somebody on the phone and figure something out logistically or what have you. But I would just say ultimately, we've had lots of scares, I would say. I don't know, John, is that accurate to say? We've had a lot of scares at times.
So there have been, over these past 2.5 years, actually it's been almost exactly 2 years since we did our very first interview weekend up near Portland, Oregon, with Terry Scott Taylor, Joe Taylor, Rob Watson, and Robert Diebel. One of the things that I really was freaking out about, I knew it wasn't going to get in the way of finishing the film, but I was like, okay, how do we deal with this? And what it was the Prayer Chains interview. Now, Todd had gone to great lengths to put together a schedule for when he and his daughter Charlotte were going to drive down from Oregon to Southern California and tackle about 20 artists on a 5-day trip. And they were able to pretty much get everybody that we were after to sit for the interview. What happened was Eric, the bass player, was dealing with a really, really painful issue with his neck and his upper back. And he just, we were the day before, he's like, you know what? There's just absolutely no way. But here's the situation with the Prayer Chain. And, they had a long-standing agreement amongst themselves. I don't know how many years it's been like this, but if they were to do an interview for anybody, all 4 members needed to be present. I was bummed out about that. Can't you just make an exception for us for the film? Yeah. And the answer was no. Eric is going to get treatment. And he did. And I can tell you for a fact, he's doing way better now. But this caused us to sort of like shift gears and be patient. And that's a big thing with a film like this. We learned a lot about being patient. But here's how it ended up. I'm looking back on that, and I was actually thankful that Eric was not able to be there, and thus the whole band wasn't able to be there, because we ended up in Eric's living room to do that interview. When he was healed, he was not completely healed, but enough that he opened his doors. Now, because Todd was no longer in Southern California, he had to take his daughter back to Oregon. We have another person on our team, Eddie, and he has a crew that he works with. And so we said, hey, can you get together your equipment and your crew and do the Prayer Chain in Eric's living room? And the answer was yes.
Yes.
And that evening, Jason Dean came down and he, I think, took Tim Tabor out for dinner beforehand. And it was, I don't want to give too much away, but it was almost like a party before the actual interview took place. So that was like that. I mean, I use the
and that wouldn't have happened, right?
Well, yeah, I use the phrase a God thing, and there have been so many things like this throughout the making of this film. I'm just like, I drove home after that evening was over, and I was pretty spent, as I'm sure the Prayer Chain members were too, and Eddie and his crew, but I was just like so thankful that, okay, Prayer Chain are going to be in the film. It was just like, it was a wild circumstance that happened, but yeah.
Well, that's a great story, and I appreciate the reminder of that, because it's taking me back as well on all of that experience. We had this amazing location called the Tower, the Water Tower. It's a historical place. It's not
Seal Beach.
Seal Beach. Thank you. I knew you'd come up with it. Seal Beach area. So it stands, head and shoulders above everything else that's in that particular neighborhood. And it just happened to come available at a discounted rate because it wasn't being rented at the time for whatever reason. So I was like, okay, we're going to jump on that because not only is it super vibey, it has enough floors and space to pull off multiple setups. And for that shoot, that five-day shoot in multiple locations on that, this was just one of 3 locations. And I had specifically the top level, which had these groovy leather chairs that were pleated with metal. And we were going to do in the round for of the prayer chain, each artist facing one another, each of the members.
Oh, wow.
And, I had flown in a second cameraman, a friend of mine, Scott Weba from Portland, Oregon. And we've been friends for a lot of years. We had Rob Burks come up from San Diego to be another set of hands to help shift and move sets and furniture. Everybody lent a hand. Chad Ashton came in, and I'm probably leaving other people out, but we shot lots of other interviews in that location. But what I'm getting at is, yeah, it was a little bit of a letdown. However, the prayer chain guys came through in spades, as did the spur of the moment crew.
Yes.
Which is Eddie and Daniel, who have helped us out on multiple level shots. Beautiful cinematic interviews over at a beautiful old church with Jairo and Jerome and so many other people, again, stepping in the hour of need, in the 11th hour, because they all believe in this project and they believe in these bands and they believe in these stories. But the prayer chain went to great lengths to get it together and make it happen. And we have some gorgeous, beautiful footage. And John did a bang up job on the interview of that night. And they have a lot of personal history through Rock of Love and some of their the radio program, and just a lot of great connections. So again, because everybody believes in this project, it's fantastic to see everybody coming together to form sort of this unity bond of one goal. You know what I mean? So we have, I mean, not to give it too much away, but we do have several hours worth of stellar interview footage on so many great subjects with the prayer chain.
So one of my questions was there a happy accident but the prayer chain thing was kind of that.
It kind of was. Yeah.
Yeah. That would be it, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you think of any others?
Was there something that hit you more, emotionally harder than you expected,
yes,
during any interviews, or was that happening and with a lot of interviews?
I know where John's going with this, but I want you to take it, John.
I'd like.
Well, we can each take a turn. I don't know if maybe.
No, maybe I don't. Maybe.
But there were several times.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I've always been like this, but I get pretty emotional. It doesn't take much. Sometimes when I'm around someone who moves me. And I had seen Daniel Amos in concert several times. For some reason, we never booked them for one of our shows, but I've been to Cornerstone a couple times, and I think I saw them out there once. And they played at some like pizza place in Pomona, Southern California, with like 12 years ago, and I saw them there. And I've always loved the Alarma Chronicles, but I didn't really know Terry Scott Taylor. I'd never met, in my memory, Terry Scott Taylor. I'd seen the Lost Dogs before. And he was the first weekend of interviews. And I was just like, I was a little nervous. I don't normally get nervous interviewing people that I know. And Todd found this really cool rustic cabin in Welch's, Oregon. It's about an hour east of Portland, out in the middle of nowhere. And so Terry arrives. Let me see if I can remember this. I think Rob Watson in the same car with Terry's son. And we had a really cool setup. There are a couple, Airstreams out back. And so we gave them one. But Terry, at one point, I had not gone up and spoken with him yet, but I was inside the cabin helping Todd get set up. And I looked out on the patio on the deck, and Terry Taylor was talking with Robert Diebel. And actually, Robert Diebel, this will be in the film, so I don't want to say too much, but Robert also was sort of looking forward to talking with Terry. And so I walked outside, I interrupted them, and I said basically, hey, I don't mean to interrupt, but I did mean to interrupt. And I stood there in front of Terry, and I said, Terry, I just want you to know how much your song Sanctuary has meant to me over the years. I said, it's one of my favorite songs from anyone of all time. And I started getting emotional. I started breaking up. He stands up out of his chair, comes over, and just gives me a big hug. I will never forget that moment.
Wow.
Powerful.
That's awesome. Wow.
Yeah,
That's nice.
that was my wow.
Should the stars get in your eyes tonight? Remember, love. Should the strong winds become far too much? Remember, no sanctuary, sanctuary, no sanctuary, sanctuary.
I would say on that note and that question for myself, I think, one of the bands that I never got to see live that I highly admire and love and have every single record, follow it along every step of the way, which would be Daniel Amos, DA. And the work of Terry Scott Taylor, everything he had his hand on, whether it was, producing, co-producing, singing on, playing on every project. I love his work to this day. And not too many months before he had released his newest wonderful accomplishment of This Beautiful Mystery, and it's a new solo project. And of course, all the great, staple of players and so on. And so the mere fact that he agreed to an interview and, there were some logistical challenges and a few health challenges that we weren't sure of, Terry's kind of our elder statesman, if you will, of this scene, and God bless him. He has been leading the charge year after year, day after day, song after song, really. And so I was just so pleased that he was willing to come spend time with us. And not only, it's not like he said, "Oh, I can give you 30 minutes, boys." He gave us 2+ hours of his time late into the evening, as did others. I'm pinpointing this one because you asked a question about something that might have hit us more emotionally. Because I did see the Lost Dogs, and I love the records of the Lost Dogs and Terry's songwriting, of course, the others as well. Highly respect all of them, love all of them. But since Terry was kind of leading the charge lyrically on so many of those records, and I had seen them play live numerous times over the years, many times with Gene as well. So that was blessed to see a lot of Gene, and I highly regard Gene as one of the greatest songwriters, out there, as well as Terry and many others from our film. But that being said, Terry gave us moments on camera during our interview that were, I can't even look at the screen to see John because he's sitting next to me. And, we had 2 cameras running most of the time, but then my second cameraman, Scott, had to be off because he has a day job. He had to catch a flight early the next morning, and he lives out over in Vancouver, Washington. I just recall Terry being so transparent, so real, so honest, and so passionate, well-spoken, but no regrets, no, just his love for family, his work, love for friends and bandmates and fellow man is just immeasurable. And it goes beyond what words can describe what took place in that room on camera. But I'll tell you, I can't tell you how many times John and I are breaking up, emotionally, because I think we're both a couple of emotional dudes as we get older.
Well, and Terry was too.
Terry was too. Yes.
And this is close to midnight.
Yes.
I mean, it was a long day. So
hard days.
He gave us at least 2 hours of interview,
Yes.
but they arrived in the early afternoon. So basically half the day they were with us, and it was
hanging out. Yeah.
It was that was a day.
Well, and there's just so many great moments, in Nashville, outside of Nashville, when we shot interviews with the choir and Mike Rowe. And the list is endless of powerful moments because this is what I was just telling someone this recently on a walk. I do a morning walk and an evening walk in my neighborhood, and I'm often making phone calls to friends or family or business or whatever. And I remember just very recently saying, these artists are not just, I think if somebody else who was not connected to the scene, connected to the songs, and followed these careers along countless years, decades, can you imagine what this film might feel like, how sterile it might be, and this story might be if it was just a couple of guys who were like, I hear a good story. Let's make it happen, boys. Let's make it happen, film crew. And not know the history and the background and the hearts of these artists enough as a viewer, a listener to their songs all these years. And some of them, I have friendships outside of what John has with some of these artists as well, dating back to, my introductions to Greg Lawless and, some of the artists themselves, Mike Knott and so on. But that being said, I really think because John has a personal experience, relatable experience to the scene as a promoter and a radio guy and a music fan, as do I on different levels, I think that brings a much needed heart and soul to a story that already has, oodles of heart and soul within the artists. But now it's like us trying to lovingly, cherry pick those moments that make the most sense for a storyline that's cohesive, to the best of our ability. And I think that's sort of the gift that the artists have given us in the end through this documentary, personally.
Let me quickly just add to that I feel a huge responsibility in that the artists are showing a great level of trust that they have given us these interviews.
Yes.
They are now trusting us to do what we feel is best with those interviews in making this film, and that's a big responsibility, and I don't look past that I'm reminded of that every day.
It is a weighty form of trust and expectation, but again, I feel strongly that we have the right people in the right places to help tell their story, help assist tell their story. As an editor, as a video editor by day in and day out for 25 years, I know what's going to end up on the cutting room floor, and it breaks my heart how much excellent meat and potatoes, great footage is going to by nature have to end up on the cutting room floor. It's a little heartbreaking as a fan.
We're both looking for what we call the golden nuggets, and here's the good news. 50 hours of interview footage or something like that?
Yeah, we're rapidly approaching easily 50 hours.
This is why we will easily spend a couple hours with a band or even one artist, is to compile a deep catalog of golden nuggets where now we don't have to try and find them. They're all right there. It's just which ones are we going to use? Yeah. It's an amazing problem. It's an amazing problem, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a good problem to have. Yeah.
Yes.
Did making the film, did it change your perspective on that scene or did it add to it? Did it change anything?
Yes. So I also didn't remember a lot of things. And when we were in the middle of, back in the mid 80s, doing the radio interviews, every week was a live radio broadcast, at least one. When we were putting the concerts together and doing what we were doing and the bands were doing what they were doing, I had no idea a lot of the things that were going on behind the scenes with a lot of these bands. Okay. And in asking a lot of the questions that we've been asking, I had no idea what some of the answers would be coming out of their mouths. And I was like blown away a lot of times. I was like, what? To myself, I was like, are you serious? I had no idea that was happening. Some things good, some things not so good. But yeah, this has been a huge learning experience for me in two ways. One, just like, learning about stuff I never knew about with the bands and their history, but two, how to make a film. I think I've shared that, that's Todd's part, doing video, doing editing. I've never, ever in my life been involved with making a film before. So we are very complementary in that I have, the part of the concert promotion and the radio, and Todd has all this other thing that he's been experienced with. And so we come together, and I think we're making a pretty good team. I think we complement each other very well.
Yeah.
I might just add that on that question, did making this film change your own perspectives on that scene or that generation? because I did live a large part of it, for a lot of years myself. We did actually had about a 3-year stint as a concert promoter. Then later here in Oregon with some friends, we did a couple of years at a little coffee house. It was a little Christian coffee house. And we brought in Gene Eugene and Mike Nod and a few other artists. And, I've had enough of a hand in it to get to know some of the artists. So, what you hear on record, record literally on song, on vinyl, on CD, on digital, whatever, versus their real lives, is often worlds apart. And I think through this experience, I just have a much more humbling, I'm humbled by the depth of these artists' experiences, both negative and positive. But to see people, I'm always rooting for the underdog. That's why this project is important to me. That's why these artists are important for me. I love and appreciate all the great successful CCM artists that exist out there. I have no qualms about what they do and how they do it and how much money they've made or they haven't, or how many units were sold or what have you. That's neither here nor there. If their heart's in it and their heart's in it for the right reasons, then great. There's all kinds of news stories. We don't have to look very far these days, unfortunately, for heartbreaking, experiences that point quite the opposite direction of that. And I think I love an underdog story. And we have so many of those within our group of artists, and I think I'm just really, really, through this experience of working on this documentary, it's really helped give me a much more grateful attitude towards all of them as a whole and individually as well, simply to hear their personal story, to hear their struggles. We've all faced struggles, be it health, financial, marriage is falling apart. We've all experienced many things of forms of suffering firsthand. But to me, what makes the best song is suffering. What makes the greatest lyric, the most memorable emotional connection to a song and a lyric and a melody is born out of struggle, or it's born out of, sometimes it's a simple prayer or a rejoicing of overcoming such a struggle. And that's why this music still resonates with so many of us. Some artists don't want to speak about themselves. I think about the late, great Michael Knott. When he was put on the spot to talk about himself, he didn't like to talk about himself. He really didn't. I know that about him personally. And he struggled to praise himself, or reflect in a positive way. Because I think great artists, the Leonard Cohens of our day, are always striving to outdo themselves in some way, to write that better song, to write that more memorable lyric. And I think you see that again and again in the songs that are presented over year after year, again and again with our artists, the artists of Us Kids and Alternative Music Rebellion. And I think that I have such a deeper level of respect for them. I have a deeper level of humility in my own heart and mind about where these songs came from. And I love that about music. And I love that about our stories within this scene. So I think I just have a more humbled perspective of what these artists have been through, both good and bad, the good, bad, and ugly of it all. I love that. I love that they were transparent enough to share some of that.
That's a great answer. Did you have any discussions, just my own curiosity, with Rick Alba?
We interviewed Rick, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Great. One of my favorite albums, Holes in the Floor of Heaven, that album.
Yes.
I loved that album so much, and I could relate to it, for some of the things I was experiencing or whatever. And so that's why I was just curious for my own,
Oh, yeah. we enjoyed playing that on the radio program, and he's an amazing songwriter. I'm sure you're aware that he on several Altar Boys albums. I mean, he either wrote or co-wrote with Mike Stand quite a few of those great songs.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Great. That's great to hear.
We interviewed him and spent a good hour with him, I'd say, at least. And he was actually one of the earlier interviews in the whole process, along with a handful of other people. And yeah, he gave us a great interview. I think ultimately, again, he is just a small sliver of a grander story that will hopefully be told. But it always goes back to what John has said time and time again, which is each of these bands really does need a full-fledged documentary about everything, because there is so much there. I mean, Ultra Boys, gosh, a mainstay in this scene, and so many others, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think I've heard a possible release date by the end of the year.
So we are aiming to complete a draft of the film by the end of the year. Draft for us, not for the public.
Yeah.
So it would be, our goal is to wrap up or be darn close to wrapping up a first draft that John and I are satisfied with, and that we're content with, proud of. And then we will move to the stage of marketing, release, all in 2026. When in 2026, I don't want to put a label or a date on that. I really don't. It's too premature, because again, this is a labor of love. This is not my day in, day out gig. I can't afford the time to devote to it that it needs. I wish I could, but it's just, that's not the kind of budget we had to work with in the first place.
Do you still have interviews to do, or have you wrapped up all of those? Or do you know?
No, that's a great question. John, do you want to hit that? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, we're done. But
Yes.
so Todd's the director, so I'll let him make that determination. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there are moments like I've actually been discussing things with Mark Kershak back and forth a little bit. We wanted him to be involved in the original shoot back when in Southern California. We did want to hear, I don't like to tell a one-sided story ever about any band or artist or experience. I like to try to have a balanced viewpoint if possible. So it was important to me. I mean, we named the film, Us Kids and, Lifesavers and all those things. And of course, all that was intentional, but it was important to me to have his voice in this. And so that may still happen, but I'm not going to say yes or no, because I honestly don't know. Some folks have removed themselves from the scene in different ways, and we roll with that. I mean, what else are we going to do? We can't bemoan the fact that someone's not on board with whatever our plan might be when it's scheduled to shoot or what have you. So yeah, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, right now, on-camera interviews are wrapped up. We just got the last of our final interviews in, like we talked about earlier. At least I referenced Michael Pritzel delivered a stellar package of interviews, and John had gone out and interviewed him out in Boston, where he lives now, and his wife Amber, and he just so gracious and so helpful, and so everybody's been a team player. So yes, the interviews have come to a close. The official interviews are done.
But before we sign off, if I could thank two entities. One is the people who donated to the GoFundMe, which was a 3-month campaign a little over 2 years ago. Chose not to do a Kickstarter for a variety of reasons. And this was basically just something that said, hey, if you'd like to see us make a film, your donation is appreciated of any amount. And we raised a little over $52,000 from that GoFundMe, and that got us started. And then I think Todd mentioned earlier, we've had some executive producers that have come in since then. And our budget is now a little over $100,000, which isn't that much for a full-length documentary film, but it's enough. It is enough. And the second, thank you, Todd just mentioned Michael Pritzel. When I flew out to meet with him, I didn't need a rental car because he picked me up from the airport. I didn't need a hotel because he invited me to stay at his loft with his wife and their pets, bird, cats, dog. I mean, I felt like a part of their family for a good 2 or 3 days. And he just went overboard with his time and generosity while I was there. Yeah, and the fact that we're just now receiving a lot of that footage from a year ago just speaks to the fact that all of these people are very busy, just like we are. Yeah, everyone has got stuff going on.
I will say this to add on to Jim, to John's thank yous. Peter Petralta, he runs our Instagram page.
Yes.
Chad and I are admins on the Facebook page. We now have a website recently launched. Its basic structure is in order.
Thank you, Jason Dean.
Yes, thank you, Jason Dean, and a web designer.
Paul Steyer.
Paul Steyer, who is our graphic designer, who came up with the fist and the logo and the cassette grasping.
Very talented.
Very talented. And again, so many people either, working by far under market level of their services and talent, but that's because they believe in the project. Who have I left? Rob Burks.
Rob Burks and our lawyer Rob Reynolds. We have a lawyer for this project, and that's a good friend of mine I've known for over 4 decades. He and his wife just celebrated a wedding anniversary recently, and so Rob Reynolds is the Us Kids lawyer. And I think that pretty much there might be a few others that we're forgetting, but there's so many that have invested, not monetarily but with time and with just phone conversations here and there. The artists themselves. I'm just going to pick one, Dan Michaels. All right. So,
oh my goodness. Yeah.
Well, Dan played saxophone for Adam again, and he's still an instrumental part of the choir, but he has gone, beyond anything that we imagined or expected when it comes to offering help with this, not just making the film, but what to do with it after it's done.
Yes.
So if we had another hour, there's stories that I could share. And Todd has stories as well, but I think we're out of time. But no, it's just been an amazing parade of just generosity from these artists towards us.
Yes. Talent and skill sets donated, given, everyone has been very uncompromising in their devotion to this project, knowing full well that we needed the help. We could not have done it to this level thus far. And again, I just want to say thank you to everyone involved, each and every individual who believes in the Us Kids film project. It is something that we hope will make you proud. That is our goal. That is our end goal.
And thank you to the podcasters. You two, tonight, I've really enjoyed my time, going down this little memory lane with you two. This has been a lot of fun.
Myself as well. Great questions, great comments from everyone. And thank you for that opportunity. And I will say thanks to my good pal, Spun Counter Guy of Orphans of God. He's always very helpful and supportive, and he is like a very backseat guy when it comes to the Us Kids project. However, he has been so supportive every step of the way. He's one of us by blood, birthright, and trial by fire, baptism by fire into this music scene. He was a DJ. He's a podcast host since 2014. He had a record store in Nashville. It goes deep for him. So this is a big, he's a big supporter of this every step of the way. So appreciate you, Spawn, letting me defect from our podcast into another.
No, that's cool. No,
cool. And I love the crossover promotion too.
We extend our thanks to everyone you mentioned as well. Thank you to you guys for your time.
Absolutely.
Our
time is valuable.
Our pleasure.
So we thank you so much. Have a great evening. We'll talk to you soon. We'll let you know.
Thanks, guys.
Have a great
talking to you guys.
Thanks a lot.
See you later.
Bye.
And that is going to wrap it up for this awesome episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope for those of you who were part of the scene and are really excited about this, that you really enjoyed hearing some additional comments and perspective from John and Todd and Chad. And for those of you who are just now hearing about the scene for the first time, I hope you were able to learn a little bit more about what was happening in the early 80s through the 90s, and go and check out the artists and bands that were discussed. Please go and also check out Us Kids and Alternative Music Rebellion at the website uskidsrockumentary.com. And also go check out the Facebook page and follow at facebook.com/Us Kids and an Alternative Music Rebellion. I'll put all of this information in the show notes, as well as a link to their Instagram account so you can follow them there. Some people follow Instagram more than they do Facebook. I want you to be able to find them there as well. I have a couple of episodes that are currently in post-edit right now that I'm really excited about. So I'm not going to drop any band names right now, but I am going to say that I think There are going to be a lot of fans that are very excited about the upcoming episodes. In addition, we have an interview coming up in the following week that I'm very excited about. It's a band that's been on my list from the very beginning, who many people have not heard of, but I have heard from some listeners that they would be really interested to hear from this band. So there's something to ponder and look forward to. And until then, peace to you, my fellow Earth babies. Take care.